Usually when you sign a contract, there's an expectation of literal, precise delivery. Like, if the brochure promises an abundant life, you're picturing smooth sailing, clear skies, the whole package.
Right, yeah. The fine print in our minds guarantees the removal of all our problems. We just naturally assume that if we follow the rules, well, the obstacles disappear.
Exactly. But then you dive into historical spiritual texts, and suddenly that brochure looks, completely different. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Our mission today is to explore a spiritual excerpt titled Talking About Jesus from a document called cc1q2.pdf. We're looking at this impartially to unpack how this text philosophically approaches faith, hardship, and the very nature of divine promises.
It's definitely a text that forces you to confront our modern assumptions about what a good life is actually supposed to look like.
Okay, let's unpack this because the text starts with a massive foundation of certainty.
Oh, absolutely.
It claims that the promises of God aren't shifting shadows or empty sounds carried by the wind. They are living, unchanging assurances.
What's fascinating here is how quickly the text pivots. It lays down this unbreakable, absolute bedrock, but immediately asks a very human question.
Right.
Like, if these promises are so solid, why does the human heart tremble? Why do you doubt when, as the text puts it, the waves grow high and the night stretches long?
That's a fair question, honestly.
Yeah, and psychologically, this is a brilliant rhetorical tool. By validating your fear and normalizing human fragility first, the author lowers your defenses.
Which makes you so much more receptive to the radical reframing that comes next.
Exactly.
Wait, I have to push back a bit on the logic the text uses to get there, though.
Go for it.
If this text is promising an abundant life, why does it spend so much time talking about heavy burdens and refining fires? How does the author reconcile that contradiction?
That is the big question.
If the promise is absolute, why is the believer still getting completely hammered by the storm?
Well, that tension is the core of the whole document. The author reconciles it by intentionally divorcing divine love from earthly circumstances. Yeah, the text essentially argues that your present-day tragedies are not a barometer for divine affection, by placing the ultimate proof of that love entirely in the past.
Wait, in the past?
Right, specifically stating it was already fully declared at the cross. So the text psychologically immunizes the believer's faith against present-day chaos.
Okay, I see. You no longer look at a terrible year and assume the promise is broken.
Exactly.
It reminds me of the difference between an umbrella and an anchor. Like, we usually want faith to be this magic umbrella that keeps the rain from ever touching us.
Oh, I like that analogy.
But the text treats it like an anchor. The storm still rages. You're getting absolutely soaked, but the anchor prevents you from being swept away.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And building on your anchor analogy, the text goes a step further. It claims the tension on that anchor line is actually the point.
But tension itself.
Yeah, the friction is the mechanism for growth.
Yeah.
It says the fire that tests your faith is also the fire that refines it. So the weight you carry isn't meant to crush you, but to press you closer to the divine heart.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if you accept that earthly suffering doesn't equal divine abandonment, you have to completely scrap your definition of an abundant life.
You do. That complete rewrite of the definition is the ultimate conclusion of the excerpt.
Right.
The text redefines abundance not as the absence of struggle, but the presence of the divine within it. And the mechanics of this are entirely internal.
Which makes sense.
Right. You aren't miraculously changing the external chaos. You are shifting your internal anchor point, allowing you to find peace in the midst of chaos and, joy in the midst of sorrow.
So what does this all mean? Whether you approach a text like this from a place of deeply held personal faith, or you're reading it purely as a philosophical study, it offers a really fascinating psychological reframe.
It really does.
Adversity isn't framed as a sign of abandonment. Instead, it becomes a deliberate, necessary space for grounding and building resilience.
It completely flips our modern pursuit of, friction-free existence entirely on its head.
It does, which leaves you with a pretty radical question to ponder.
Yeah.
If a truly abundant life actually requires the friction of hardship to build that internal resilience, does a life of pure comfort actually rob us of our greatest potential?